everyone. I'd like to start my presentation by asking you a question. How many of you have heard about Toastmasters pathways? Raise your hand. Okay, just a few of you. And those of you who have not heard about Toastmasters pathways, sit back, relax, because this is exactly what my goal tonight is going to be. Brief you in on the Toastmasters pathways, explain some highlights, address some concerns, and answer questions. For those of you who have heard about Toastmasters pathways, I hope that you will find some interesting details into the program and will increase your level of knowledge pertaining to this concept. Pathways is a revitalized educational program. The agenda of my presentation is going to look like this. I'm going to share the motivation behind the new educational program, go over some highlights of it, address some common concerns, provide you a program roadmap, and finally, at the end of my presentation, there will be a 2 to 3 minutes question and answer period. So if you get a question throughout my presentation, please note it down, and I will be happy to answer it at the end of the presentation. Why do we need a new educational program? Change is inevitable. The time goes, everything changes, technology changes, the needs change, the people change. And if we were, for instance, look at the change of the design of the famous BMW automaker brand, it looks obvious, right? In 1970, we had a car like this, quite square, and then it went through the incarnations, and this is what we end up with in 2016, right? And we expect this kind of change, right? Because there is new technology, there are new methods of building and designing the cars, new materials that become available, and so on. However, when it comes to Toastmasters educational program, would you believe that it hasn't changed since 1970? For almost half of the century, the same materials that have been derived back then stayed unchanged. Since 1970, we had internet, we had a revolution in computing, we had so many changes, and the communication just fails to address the ever so huge needs that we face with the introduction of these technological changes and business changes. This is why in 2010 the Toastmasters Board of Directors decided that the communication program that Toastmasters offers has to adjust and adapt to the changes that surround us. And they came up with the concept of Toastmasters pathways. The quote we see at the top is something that members, Toastmasters members who had a chance to look into these new materials already and test them had to say about it. Innovative, engaging, relevant. And this is truly the case. Toastmasters pathways by no means trashes the old communication program, but it rather builds on top of it. It just takes the communication program up to the next level. Amongst the highlights, there are really 3 highlights that I would like to mention today. The first one being the expansion of the learning path. And this is exactly why it's called pathways. We've talked so much throughout our Toastmasters experience about the communication and leadership going hand in hand with each other. And yet, if you look at your manuals, we have separate manuals, communication and leadership. So how are they together if we have separate communication and leadership tracks and separate learning materials? Toastmasters Pathways really addresses that inconsistency, and it really brings the communication and leadership learning experience together, and it blends them into this new educational pathways, some of which are listed here, and there are more to come in the future. You may see that they address different views and sides of the modern business and modern technology. And this is how they blend in to the needs of the modern world. The new educational program also goes hand in hand with the modern technology. It provides the rich multimedia experience. Not only will you be able to read the educational materials that Toastmasters provides to us, but it will also be complemented by some interactive learning materials, by some video materials, and so on. And that is in turn is enabled by the technology behind it, because the new program is really gonna be online based and it's gonna be mobile ready. So you will be able to launch materials on your tablet and interact with it as never before. Now, some of you may get concerned about it, because, for instance, I'll speak for myself. When I first read about the pathways, I thought, well, I've invested so much money into these printed manuals, and I've invested so much time going through this existing learning track to get up to the DTM, and now they introduce the whole new system, so am I being left behind? That's not the case. First and foremost, the printed materials will still be available alongside with the digital materials. However, obviously, if you choose to opt in for printed materials, you won't get the same level of experience in terms of interaction, in terms of richness of the new content. Yet there is an option. DTM will still remain the highest level of the educational program achievement. And last but not least, the current program and the new program will run concurrently, probably up until early 20s, because there are some changes that need to take place. In terms of roadmap, 3 milestones that are really worth mentioning is that in January 2017, 3 regions will start their pilot. In the meantime, the remaining 8 regions, including Region 11, which Russia belongs to, will not participate in the pilot, but will rather be gradually rolled into the program after the initial pilot stage completion. And finally, as I mentioned, for at least 24 months upon the full rollout completion, the current program and the new program will run concurrently. To sum it all up, the new Toastmasters Pathways program will provide flexible and rich learning material experience. Russia will not be part of the initial pilot, and there is nothing to worry about if you are currently heavily invested into the current educational path, because you will have plenty of time to either finish it as it is or gradually transition into the new format. With this, I would like to bring up the question and answer session. So if you do have any questions, I am happy to answer those. Mikhail.
I love the program. Thank you, Max. What can I do tomorrow to get closer to it?
That's a very good question. For those interested, you can approach me at the end of the presentation, or even better, I will share the slides and include a link to the page that will get you access to a volunteering form. So by applying through that form, you will be able to get an early look at the program, and by that get closer to this experience. Yes?
How did you know about this program?
How did I know about it? Perfect question. I actually was lucky enough to finally have gotten the Toastmasters magazine in my post box. And this is where I first heard about it. Any other questions? All right, if there are no questions, you can actually learn more about the program by following this short link that provides a list of frequently asked questions. Please feel free to go there in your spare time. And in conclusion, I would like to again reiterate that the change is for good. The new Toastmasters Pathway program will provide flexible and rich experience that will meet each and every one of our needs. It will be rolled out in phases, and Russia will not be part of the initial pilot, but will rather be rolled in later on. And last but not least, if you want to finish the current educational path that you've been pursuing, you will have plenty of time, because the old program, current program, and the new program will run concurrently for at least 24 months after the full rollout completion. So please keep calm and embrace the change. Thank you.